My name's Robert Milne. I'm a GAD with GAD, which is a group account director with generalised anxiety disorder. I'm also a member of the LGBTQI community. I'm a really strong altruist. I'm left-handed. I'm a HSP, highly sensitive person. So I guess I know a little bit about how to be different, or what makes me different. I am also, my superpowers have developed by learning through personal adversity. I've learnt to zap the bullies, deflect the negative Nellies, and build resilience. I possess superpowers, and my favourite Superman hero is Superman, of course. So, I've got my t-shirt on. Woo! Mild-mannered, now Superman. So here we go. Climate change, environmental sustainability, mental health, organisational purpose, they're all going to be really key words for 2020. I think the sad thing about the conversations that we're having at the moment is how do we deal with the issues rather than how to avoid them. So today's illustrious panel includes a man who has had it all and wasn't happy, a woman who lost it all but has found happiness, and a man who tried to carry it all on his shoulders but found a new purpose. An extraordinary set of individual stories who all now focus on raising awareness and educating others on dealing with these ever-growing societal and organisational issues. We'll start with Tracy today. Tracy has held marketing director roles at GoDaddy, eBay, Virgin Mobile, and has overcome a number of personal hurdles. She lost her father at 26. He was diagnosed with leukemia and died within 3 weeks. She's gone through an unhealthy marriage and a subsequent divorce. Her mum was diagnosed with breast cancer but has survived, and was in a relationship with a man after her divorce. That's really important. Who was a complete fraud and stole most of her life savings. So Tracy's story was turned into the award-winning podcast produced by The Australian called Who the Hell Was Hamish? And we'll talk about that this afternoon. And at one point, Tracy threw in her corporate gig as a startup hedge manager and went to India and Nepal for a year of volunteering. Tracy, to kick us off today, I wonder if you've learnt of the word jugaad while you're in India. It's defined as the ability to get by without a lot of resources and find new and creative ways of solving a problem. In India, it is considered very important to establish harmony between yourself and the universe and to recognise chaos, peace, and difficulty. What life lessons did you learn while living in India, and how important was this for your recovery through your personal experiences?
Thanks, Robbie. As Robbie said, I was 26 and my dad was suddenly diagnosed with a very aggressive form of leukemia, and he died 3 weeks later. It was an incredible shock. My family didn't know what had hit us, and for anyone who's lost a parent at any age, your world comes crashing down around you. And I'd like to say that I handled my grief incredibly well and got the help I needed and threw myself into my career, but I didn't do any of those things. I ran away to India, as you do, and I decided to volunteer in India and Nepal for a year and found myself in a slum school in southern India called Christelle House. And the children that went to this school were from incredible poverty. They came from places that you wouldn't even put an animal, really. They were on garbage dumps, everything you could imagine. There was feces everywhere, alcoholic parents, abuse, families of 10 people living and sleeping on a hut floor. And I looked at them and I couldn't actually quite believe that they were actually the most incredibly happy little souls I've ever seen. And I was shocked, I was astonished, and I was teaching them every day. And I asked them, I said, why are you guys so happy? Like, what is it that makes your life so great? And the answers just came and came and came. And it was, oh, Miss, I have clothes. Miss, I get food. Miss, I have a roof that doesn't leak. I get books, I get educated. And what dawned on me was that they were focusing on the things that they did have and not the things that they didn't have. And for me, that was so powerful, because when I had left Australia after Dad died, all I could think about was what I had lost. And when I returned, all I could think about was what I had and how lucky I was and how much we have available to us here. And I think when you're going through adversity and really tough times, it could be, losing a loved one or losing your life savings. The only thing that you have control over, because a lot of these things are out of your control, is your mindset and your perspective. And, when I need perspective, I think about those children. I think about the Crystal House kids. So, yeah, that's what I do.
Perspective and mindset is really critical to understanding your place in life, I guess. I think we're very lucky in Australia, in a first world country, to be able to sit back and, we're very lucky, especially we have to start comparing ourselves to, countries in India where they're not getting by so well. Thank you, Trace. Lucio, you might have seen this man around already today. He's already done a moderation session. He did a speaking session yesterday. He's Stoic. He's a Buddhist. He's a meditator. He's a lecturer at RMIT and deacon, and the list goes on. He's a public speaker. He's ran an agency before. But in 2018, after an episode of burnout, Luch led him to clinical depression and suicidal behaviour. Luch started studying and researching resilience. His personal research has taken him to more than 20 countries over the last 2 years. He's researched and learned and lived with refugees while volunteering in Greece and Europe. He's lived with Confucius monks in China. He's observed socio-economic realities and its impact on resilience with families in Cuba. Luch, can you tell us about your experiences in those countries? And has that led you to a similar conclusion of Tracy and of personal recovery? And do those in lower socio-economic positions think differently to their current circumstances compared to Australians?
All right, so I'm all this, and I'm also, the thing you forgot to say, I'm loud. I'm really loud. All right, so I came from the really dark place of chaos. And I fastly became a nihilist, right? Fastly, I live for the process. And it's a pretty dark place to be, right? I took this lift to the underworld and I stayed there, and I decided to stay there without even knowing. So I literally lived the fact that I believed that you have a nice car, have a great title, have all this stuff, it was enough. I actually did it. I truly believed that. And I got to the point that all these personas that I created just got confused, and I completely had no idea. I would introduce myself saying, "Hey, I'm Lucio, I'm the marketer who deals with this, got these awards." Like, it's kind of really tiring, right? Carrying that personas all over the place. And you know what's really fucked? You forget about it. Like, just 10 minutes later, you don't even know who you are. So the turnaround for me was one day I woke up and I looked to my wife. I could not stop crying. I had no explanation. I was stuck in bed. I could not get off the bed. I told her, I said, look, it's enough. I don't want anymore. I don't want anything anymore. There was no reason. I just want this to finish. And there, to make it even worse, I got separated. That was the initiation of a conversation of my wife and I to separate. And although it was a very friendly, such a thing exists, we separated very friendly, but was the initiator of that. So it was a moment of loss. That's how I felt with. So I just need to run. It's a little bit of a hero's journey. You know, if you're really into Carl Jung and understand the archetypes and the journey they need to go to find. And I found, out of these places I've been and doing some quite intensive work there and observing, I found a cup of truth. And then I got back and applied this truth. First one is what I found around there is how powerful it is for you to become anonymous. And I had no idea about that. And that was so empowering. I went to Greece, which was up to now the largest country with refugees in the world. And I lived with these people from Libya and Syria, and they just needed to get by. It's exactly the same. They just need to get by. This gentleman, this man came to me and said, look, I need to learn English. And I said, oh, great. I'll teach you how to be and la, 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 la. And he said, no. I need to learn how to talk to doctors because I have kids and my wife, and if I cannot protect them, I'm worthless, right? That's all he wanted. All right, it's just basic needs. And then I didn't have to carry business cards. I was nobody when I was in the middle of everybody. And then I didn't really understood that until I got back and reflected and talked to friends. I said, there's something I carry back that I cannot explain. And what I understood later on was the power of being anonymous. Because when I was anonymous, all my personas fell. I didn't bag. I didn't put on my bag and took with me. They stayed home here, and it was really powerful. The second thing I observed was the power of community. True community based in common beliefs, common morals, and perhaps purpose. And I just realized I didn't have communities anymore. And community, in my view, is when you lose community, is the beginning of loneliness. And it's very different than alone. Being alone, I love being alone. I love doing mental work and do process and doing my stuff. But loneliness is a very dark place to be. And the beginning of that loneliness is the fact that you are stripped out of the most divine, powerful thing, which is your worth, is your connection. And you're removed from there. And this is nothing more divine, nothing more worth than actually that sense of community and belonging and knowing that you have a purpose, a common purpose. That was the biggest lesson. So I'm getting myself around here. In Cuba, I learned a really important lesson. That's the last piece. In Cuba, I landed in Cuba, and I say, oh, fuck, there's so much poverty here. Oh, I know. Maybe I can do this, and I'll help, give some money, and do. And then, after a few days, I thought, shame on you. How dare you to walk here, not knowing anything, and shitting rules on how these people are going to live their lives better. How dare you? And I had this really bad trip and a little bit of shame and guilt of thinking there. So that led me to understand that my story for 43 years overlapped people's stories. What perhaps Jung calls projection, or in Stoicism, we call also projection, that we overlap your dark, your shadow into others, and yet, you know what you do? You blame others. So you look into some situations I did in Cuba, and I say, oh, you know what, if he really wants, or she really wanted, he or she could have a better life, how dare you saying that? And then very easily, I connect this to a business sense. How many times, be truth to yourself, how many times you walk into a meeting and you have a debate with a colleague or someone, and you're not even listening to that person because you know what you're doing? You're strategizing your response because you know you're better. And that's where these conflicts start. And that's what I lived 43 years. And it was tiring. So these are some of the truths I found. I can go on and on, but I'll stop it.
Invite our third panellist to have a chat now. Sean Hall. He's worked for Telstra for nearly 8 years. Worked up the ranks very, very quickly. GM of brand strategy, and then onto personal experience, or what was it called? Employee experience. Before he had a very personal experience himself, and he basically woke up while he was still awake in a David Jones store and had no idea where he got there or how he got there, what he was doing in there. So I think Sean realised at that point that he was on the verge of a breakdown, of burnout, that he needed to change what was going on in his life. He's since recovered. He's head up a wellbeing accelerator. You've collaborated with the University of Sydney around neuroinsights, around being energy resilient or having energy intelligence, before launching his own organisation called Energx. with a mission to enable people and organisations to find the energy they need to achieve their purpose. Sean, you obviously loved your job at Telstra. I'm very same. I'm passionate about what I do, about working 60, 70 hours a week, getting the job done, making everyone else happy, but to our own detriment and our own mental health, I guess, in a way. Can you tell us a little bit more about Energx, energy intelligence, and being an energist?
So I think just one point that you made there too is I think that what drove my burnout at that point of finding myself literally in David Jones, not knowing how I got there, was actually that I loved my job too much. There's not many opportunities you get as a marketer to change or work or run a brand that touches the life of every person in a nation. And so one of the lesser known warning signs too that I experienced was that when you find that you have to wear your Speedos for undies. Has anyone ever had to do that? Because you just don't even have any time to do your washing. So those sorts of things you've got to keep an eye out for. But what really led me to do what I do today is that what I realised is that I couldn't change Telstra. You know, I had made the decisions that led me to be in that position, to push myself to the edge of burnout. No one told me that I had to stay at work till 2 a.m. and be back at 6. I made those decisions, and that was driven because I was a perfectionist and I was a yes guy, and I didn't know how to ask for help. And so I had to take responsibility for that. I couldn't change Telstra, I had to change me. And I think one of the ironic things in that too was that my first career was actually in the fitness industry. So I spent 16 years jumping around in Lycra, teaching classes all around the world.
The theme here, like
Speedos. Yeah. You know, don't like to wear much. So, so I knew a lot about the physical aspects of well-being, but I didn't know about how the other decisions that were impacting me, and I really had to figure out what I didn't know. And that was where the idea of, I guess, that the skill of energy intelligence came from, is like, what decisions am I making that energize me? What decisions am I making that deplete me? And how can I get to the energy goals that I want to? And so I think this all comes back to the idea of responsibility. It's sort of, but you know what Lucio is saying there as well is we are responsible for our lives. And in every moment we make decisions, whether consciously or unconsciously, that impact our lives. And so I call myself the chief energist, because I think we all have in every single moment an opportunity to make either one or two decisions. You can either be an energist, which is someone that expands your own energy first in order to expand the energy of others, or you can be an energy vampire, right? Does anybody want to be an energy vampire? You probably know a few, maybe, right? So no one wants to be an energy vampire, but we constantly make these decisions which are like little energy vampires to ourselves. So whether we choose to doubt ourselves, whether we choose not to sleep, not to eat well, those are all little energy vampire decisions. And often they actually impact other people, the people we care about most. We'll be guilty of giving our worst energy to the people that we care about the most. And so it's really been taking responsibility for that.
Yeah, well said. After your David Jones incident, we'll call it the DJI, how did you get back to basics? Did you do a lot of research? Did you kind of go, oh, shit, I've got 16 years of personal training experience, I need to start looking at that again? What did you do to build yourself back up from that moment?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I started to do was start to say no to things instead of yes. And so it feels nice to say yes, and you have to understand, I think, and really address why you're saying that, and that was really my perfectionist behaviour. I had a desire, I needed to, I guess because of the way I grew up in a household where it wasn't always safe, essentially, and so as an adult, I would seek out, I needed validation, I needed recognition to feel good about myself. And that's what drove my perfectionist behaviour, and I really had to address that. I needed to do that with the help of a psychotherapist, because there was some stuff I couldn't burden my friends with that stuff. No, they're not equipped to deal with it. But that was probably one of the best investments I ever made in myself. And so there was those two things, having the right support, the right professional support, and then just starting to say no. And people didn't even notice when I said no. right?
I
So
think it's a big deal, but
Yeah,
they
yeah,
don't care, do
no.
they, sometimes? Yeah. Tracy, I really like your take on getting back to basics. Can you tell us a little bit more about that approach? I know you're going to make the crowd a little bit hungry right now.
Yeah, so I don't know how many people have heard the podcast Who the Hell is Hamish, but in the months following Hamish's arrest, I was in a really bad place. I was the lowest I'd ever been. It was excruciatingly painful to get out of bed every day. And, you know, I'd spent 18 months of my life with a man who pretended to love me. He lied about himself. He lied about his life. He pretended to love me, and then he stole my life savings. So things were incredibly tough, but there was one thing that I did force myself to do each and every day, and it wasn't easy. And I knew intellectually that I could change the neurology of my brain by practicing gratitude. You know, we've all heard it, but I can personally vouch for it. And I forced myself to do it every day, which wasn't easy, as I said. And recently I looked back through my gratitude journal and I had to have a bit of a giggle because it was like 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And at this particular time I could only come up with one. And on one particular day it was, I'm grateful that the Woolworths delivery man turned up on time today. Awesome. And then around about the same time there was another entry which I had a giggle at as well, and it was, I'm grateful for hot chips with chicken salt. It is my death row meal, and I would eat it every day if I could. And, you know, what that showed me is looking back on that, I mean, things became more profound over time, and I knew that it would help me intellectually, but the actual the rigour and the practice of doing that and forcing myself to do that every day actually changed my life over the months that followed. And I've since set up an Instagram handle called Hot Chips with Chicken Salt, where I just post things that I'm grateful for and things that make me laugh, and you know, focusing on positivity. And you know, I think that amidst adversity and things that you're going through, and everyone's going to go through their own shitstorm at some point in their life, you know, there's always something to be grateful for. So.
Starving now. Let's move on to the identification of the warning signs of burnout. Sean, can you tell us about your Energx approach? There's 7 steps, I believe.
yeah, I think when I was trying to make myself well again, I had to really look back and say, you know, what had I missed? Because you don't just wake up one morning and find yourself wandering around David Jones. Like, there has to be something, you know, there.
Could have been a worse store, really.
Yeah. Could have been. I could also have not been wearing clothes or something. That would have been worse as well. But so the first one, and we've done a lot of research now. So I've turned, I guess, what I did into an assessment to help people identify if they've got those warning signs. And we've assessed over 5,000 people now in the last 2 years. And the number one warning sign is just waking up tired. If you do that day after day after day, and that's what I would say, the number one place to start if you are depleted, if you're stressed, is sleep. Right? Physiologically, we cannot do anything more if we're not sleeping well. So that's the first one. The next one, which is the highest, is as well, is feeling overwhelmed. We know that's direct pathway to anxiety as well. If you're constantly feeling overwhelmed, that's something that needs to be addressed, and we've never really been taught that skill, like how do we deal with that feeling. The next one is a lot of negative self-talk. We'll all say stuff to ourselves that we would never say to anyone else. We're all really good at being our own worst critic, and it's when that voice gets more loud and more often than we would like, then that's something that we need to start to address. Just a sense of not feeling like what you're doing is meaningful in some way. You've been working your ass off, and you're going, well, I'm not saving lives here, but I'm still giving all of this energy and work to something that at the end of the day, is it meaningful? Is it worthwhile? I think what we also see as well is that we start to act a little bit out of character when we're depleted. So if you find that it's out of character for you to be grumpy or to be an energy vampire to other people, or to be short or to be irritated in the small things that normally wouldn't get under your skin get to you, and that's happening a lot, then that's another warning sign. Lucio talked about loneliness. Like, I think that with me in this moment, I felt a sense of shame around what was going on because I had made all the decisions that led me to go to this place or to feel this way. But I also had a huge amount of risk. I'm running a $9 billion brand. I've worked my ass off to get this opportunity, and if I tell anyone, I'm going to lose it. And so that was incredibly isolating and disconnecting as well. So what we know is that of those 7, if you've got multiple of those, and the intensity or duration, the frequency in which you're feeling those, then you're much more likely to be vulnerable to a burnout, or what I call an energy crisis, where you simply don't have enough energy for what's important to you. And so we have a free version of that assessment. So if anyone wants to take it here, you just go to exiq.systems. Takes about 5 minutes. It's a free assessment. Takes you a whole bunch of content after that to tell you what to do if you're experiencing some of those things. It's normal to feel some of those at key times, and then for you to get back to square one. But it's when you start to recognise these as long-term problems or really existing in your life all the time, that's when you really start to look at what you're doing. Yeah, I think I think many of us out there, especially if you are quite career-driven, ambitious, you sort of almost end up being a high-functioning version of burnout. You're sort of on the edge, you're redlining it all the time, and you sort of do it, and then just one day, you just can't get out of bed. And I see this a lot, especially we've done a lot of work supporting professional women in the last couple of years, and just seeing huge amounts of, especially in women, chronic fatigue. And all of these, if you think about all of those warning signs, each of them in itself is just a little skill that we've never been taught. We've never been taught how to sleep well. We've never been taught how to manage overwhelm. We've never been taught how to deal with our inner critic. So all of those are skills that we can all learn. And what I'd say is take responsibility for that again. Learn that skill. Practice it every day.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sean. Lucio, burnout used to be classified as a problem that was, your own life management issues. The World Health Organization last year reclassified it and relabeled the syndrome as an occupational phenomenon, as a work-based syndrome caused by chronic stress. We're connected to smartphones all the time. We endlessly scroll through social media every day, every night before bed. We don't sleep well because of that, because of what's going through our head. Do you find this is a key issue for a lot of problems today? And what are your identification methods to detect that early signs of burnout?
I see burnout as chaos. It's kind of a very similar concept. And chaos emerges bit by bit. And then suddenly, it's quite exponential, to be honest. And it's kind of like, there's the flood in Noah's Ark, but nobody actually remembered to build the ark. So the flood comes here fogged and just takes everything back. So as I said to you, I don't carry as a scientific perspective. So I'm very careful in my words because they're very observational. And they are pretty much built on ancient philosophies of Stoicism and Buddhism and Eastern philosophies, but I also take a lot of stuff from Nietzsche and Carl Jung, which I think is phenomenal in the mindset of helping. But the reason I'm saying this is I think there's fundamentally... Okay, I'm going to change the dynamic. Sean, you don't even know that. I adore these guys here. I adore Tracy. I adore Sean. You don't know this. When a few years ago, we were in the Marketing Academy, which is a non-for-profit organization, and Sean was speaking. We didn't know each other. And this man stood up and said, we are in crisis of responsibility. And that changed me profoundly. I don't think I ever told you this. I'm not going to stand up, hug, because we're going to cry, and it's going to be like, okay, great. But the reason I'm saying this is it took me about 2 years to understand that. And I actually think there is a crisis of responsibility in the sense that the two kind of men or woman, if you like, the two kind of beings, the one who prays for the mountain to come to you and the one who prays to give the strength to the mountain. And I was the guy who would close my eyes and pray to my own gods, to the mountains to be moved for me. And I realize that's not a life of responsibility, it's a life of entitlement. And you are set from the get-go to be disappointed. Because you build stories that just live in our mind. Everything's created, it turns around and comes back here. So I came to this conclusion that responsibility, I need to take responsibility. It's really easy to go to a meeting as I did it. I was in the advertising industry. I had an agency, and someone, maybe Tracy, GoDaddy, not fair using you as example, but someone will give me the account of the picture and say, oh, what is stupid? They don't know what they're missing. How dare you? Like, what kind of life is there? And we do this all the time, all right? So the first mindset I had to change, and I changed very heavily, was responsibility. The second one is, I think also part of this whole thing is a lack of spirituality, and I know it can be controversial, and I'm not talking about religion and dogma and things like that. You follow whatever you want, whatever rocks your boat. But I'm talking about moral compasses, good and bad, evil and divine, chaos and order. I'm talking about the line between the two compasses, and you don't need to go in spirituality. We can talk about Carl Jung and saying that the balance of these extremes is what actually really matters. All right? The fact is, what doesn't create light creates its own darkness. And I did create my own darkness. And as a matter of fact, every time you try to reinvent yourself and get out of the chaos and get out of the burnout, the fact is the process is painful. That's probably one of the reasons we don't go through. In order to reborn, in order to be the new version of yourself and let space for the reborn, you need to kill a piece of yourself. You need to kill the old you. And that's painful. Sitting in your shadows, sitting down in your darkness and say, hey, I did an action last night that I didn't really appreciate. I abused slightly of my intellect with another person, and it was petty. And I regretted doing that. But the fact is, I allow me to change, because if I do the same action, it's not a mistake anymore. It's a decision now. If I'm committing the same mistake, right? It's not a mistake anymore. It's just an action. And what I learned about self-love, it's not this respectfully, la land about self-love. What I allow myself now is to forgive myself, not forget, because then becomes a mistake. What I learned is I do not want to sacrifice what I could be because of who I am. My mistake yesterday doesn't define me. It teaches me, unless I decide to. And that's my definition of taking responsibility. Not allowing a version of yourself define who you can be. Because that's actually fucking matters. There's a thing in Stoicism that we say, no more fati, memento mori, that changed my life, okay? You already live your life. It's done. It's past. It's up to you to live what you have ahead of you. And it can be the version you want. All right? But you can decide to be the noble. What we don't know is each one of us here, who has shame inside ourselves? I do. Who let that shame guide yourself? I did horrible things with a teenager, like horrible. And I let this guide myself until 40. I actually got, part of my big burnout was to wear too much of the archetype of orphan. So you know, inviting me to join for a drink with your friends would be a sign of war and despise to me. How? But seriously, this is all here. So I like to think that, just to wrap up this, Robert, I like to think that there are three things that really impact and change me. And I'm not hippie, don't get me wrong. I have clients, I work, I spend my time in three-thirds. I spend my time in three-thirds. One-third goes to lecture university, one-third goes into clients, and one-third goes into studying, researching. Every single day I read about an hour and a half, whether it's Carl Jung, whether it's Stoicism, Buddhism, philosophy. I study, I do that stuff. I decided it's a non-negotiable thing. So I'm not hippie, although I would not have anything against hippies. I just cannot plant my own lettuce and my own tomato. Maybe one day I'll do that. I cannot do that. I really love going to Woolies and buy everything's ready. I'll just take it. But I take these 3 principles of responsibility, community, and spirituality. I need a moral compass. I need a moral value, which I think it's another conversation, which I think the big part of the crisis that we're seeing now in terms of antagonists, extremist positions are because of the lack of spirituality. We lost some of the role models. And again, I'm not going to the dogma, religion against sex and gender, all this sort of stuff. That's another conversation. So I see these 3 things as a very enablers of my own being. And I even forgot that question, to be honest. I'm just going...
So we.
Okay, I have one more point. I promise. It's very quick. It's very quick. I was studying. Symbolism and myths, and I saw a thing that's very interesting. Most of the history of evolution of the man in terms of symbolism and myths, men are superior than animals, right? Very interesting. Men are superior. So Adam and Eve, Adam named animals after being put off the paradise and so forth. We always took, except by North American Indian tribes. We have a very beautiful relationship with nature and animals. And there's this tribe in America, the Pueblo tribe, and they do this amazing stuff, okay? They convince themselves, or they tell themselves that they have a social community responsibility. They worship sun and moon every day. And in their mindset is, if they do this, they're collaborating to the rest of the community, the rest of the world. It's part of the ritual to make sure the sun warms us. The moon really is lighting up in the darkness so we don't get eaten by fucking lions. So they have this moral compass, and they do understand there's a hierarchical element there, but they also understand that it's made of small pieces with meaning and purpose. Okay? And that builds the community. And I think this is the most poetical, beautiful thing. If you go to Malvernice, where I live, you're going to see me worshiping sun and no, I'm not doing that. But the story is very beautiful. For me, it's about meaning, community, integration, and function. It doesn't matter how big and how great you are. You don't need to be the freaking CEO. You have a function. Do you know how many times you can say good morning to someone, and that makes the day? So that's my whole deal. And closing to Jung, a tree cannot reach the heavens without the roots touching the hell. And that's how I feel. My tree now is reaching the heaven. Oh, stop talking. Okay, the last question. Thank you very much.
Tracy, we'll come to you. Your personal experience went from making mistakes, but I'm probably sure that you turned to yourself and looked inwards and went, well, what have I done wrong, So how did you, deal with that? And did you reach out to any other people? Did you have community support? What was your kind of steps to getting there outside of the journal, of course, the gratitude journal?
Yeah, my answer is a lot more basic than Lucio's. I love listening to you, by the way. I could do it for hours. But very practically, and I'm a pretty practical person. Sometimes you just want someone to tell you what to do. I, probably similarly to Sean, I invested heavily in a really great therapist. I needed to understand from a psychological point of view what the fuck had just happened to me. So I did that, and I highly recommend it because your friends and family are going to tell you what you want to hear, essentially. And you need an independent point of view, and for me that was paramount. I also went on to medication for a while, and it was something I resisted heavily. I didn't need it. I was stronger than that. I can get through this. I'm a naturally very positive person, so for me, that was a really difficult decision to make. But my therapist had said, you've cried every day for 3 months. This is not normal. And you might, want to go and talk to your GP, and you might think about it for a short period of time. And with even more resistance, I eventually came to the conclusion that was the right thing to do, and it was. But obviously, get your own advice around that. What else did I do? I kept connected to my tribe. Incredibly important, because loneliness is a horrible place to be. It's very easy for your world to get very small and to shrink and to not want to go out and talk to people. So keeping connected to my tribe was paramount. And then from a work perspective, because I was still working full time, I got some leave. I was dealing with the detectives and the police, and the administration around my personal finances was so incredibly high. I had 3 weeks off work. In all honesty, I probably should have had some more, because after that point in time, I threw myself back into work, and I used it as a distraction to what was really going on. And I highly recommend go and talk to your employer and ask for some compassionate leave, and take that time to do what you have to do to get yourself on a better path so that you can be your full self when you go back to work.
Yeah, we do what we know, don't we? We revert back to what we know we're good at and what makes us kind of happy, what we thought it makes us happy. But yeah. Hi. Okay, got some more questions. Well, I just want to touch quickly on Tracy again in terms of the Australian podcast. 7 million downloads now, which is absolutely phenomenal. So it's called Who the Hell is Hamish? Big round of applause for Trace. From talking to Tracy, it was certainly part of your, your recuperation and your recovery, and I think getting over that shame of what had happened to you as well. Now 7 people know what happened to you. How important is it to really share those kind of feelings with? I think you've just said it, but tell us more about how that little bit of the podcast came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, 7 million downloads. It describes the life and the crimes of Hamish McLaren, who defrauded 15 victims out of nearly $8 million. He's serving a 16-year sentence in jail currently, which is awesome. And in the months and the year following Hamish's arrest, I was so incredibly embarrassed. I was so ashamed of what had happened, and I felt really guilty. What did I do? How did I miss this? Like, how did this happen to me? And I'd never heard of anything like this before. Intimate fraud was not on my radar. I take people on face value. I trust, and I believed in love, I guess. And a girlfriend of mine, a very close girlfriend of mine, was friends and neighbours with Greg Bearup, who was the senior journalist at The Australian who produced the podcast. And he wanted to meet me, and I resisted. For a year, I resisted. I said, no, I don't want to talk about it. I am so embarrassed. I'm so ashamed. And I kept saying no. And it's probably important to mention I was also negotiating a divorce and custody of my child at the time. So things were super sensitive. And it was about a year after Hamish was arrested, and I had done a lot of work on myself. I had pulled my world in quite small. And I woke up one day, and I don't know what happened. I can't pinpoint it. But suddenly I just felt a little bit stronger. And I woke up, and literally this thought popped into my head, and I thought, he's not going to break me. He doesn't deserve that privilege. And of all the people that could do that to me, it's not going to be him. And suddenly I just had this fire in my belly. But it took a year. I was down in a pretty dark hole for about 12 months afterwards. And with that, I called Greg, and I said, I want to meet you. And I told him my story, and I felt physically sick. I was so exposed. I was so vulnerable. I told him everything. And it was around the same time that Hamish was about to plead guilty. We didn't know that at the time. And Greg said to me, I'll come to the committal hearing with you if you want me to. And I said, yes, absolutely. And we went along to that. Hamish pleaded guilty. And at that time, we got access to a 33-page document of facts, which outlined in detail the extent of his crimes. And up until that point, I knew it was kind of big. I didn't know the details. The police were very, they had to hold the information close. And we got access to that document, and it outlined in detail the other 15 victims, exactly how much money they had lost, how they'd lost it, when they'd lost it. And suddenly I knew the story was bigger than me. And suddenly I didn't feel so alone, which was really important. And Greg said to me, this is an incredible story. I want to do a podcast. Can I do a podcast? And he'd been asking me this for ages. And I said, yeah, let's do this. And, you know, 7 million downloads later, the rest is history. They're currently talking about making it into a Netflix series. So I'm hoping Margot Robbie will play me, but, you know, girl can dream, right? And, you know, I think the point of this story is, and we spoke a bit about shame, and the thing about shame is it loves secrecy. And shame can only survive in the dark. And it's not until you shine a light on the story or on the shame that it loses its power. And the moment that I spoke to Greg and the moment that this story was released, the power and the hold that it had over me in terms of my embarrassment and my shame and why this had happened suddenly went away. And the outcome of this podcast and my story has been so incredibly powerful. I can't tell you the amount of people who have reached out to me and said, oh my God, that happened to me, or that happened to my mother. Or, you know, a 70-year-old woman came to me and she said, similar thing happened to me 30 years ago. I lost my divorce settlement. I had 3 young children and I haven't spoken about it to anybody. And she started to talk about it, and she started to talk about it with her children. And the healing and the peace that's come from that, you know, just from me sharing my story. And I guess that's why I do that, because if I can help just one person, you know, then it's all worth it for me. And, you know, in sharing your story, you're not only helping others, but you also realise that you're not alone. Everyone is going through something. And your story is your superpower. That's my firm belief. So.
Yeah, there's so much darkness and lightness. I think we are, I was going to say the same thing, that we're all each other's superheroes, that we should all look to people that are like us to be superheroes and to really connect moving forward.